Welcome to the Outer Realm with Michelle Desrochers and Amelia Pisano. Airing live on the United Public Radio Network, 105.3 FM in New Orleans.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Wednesday night segment of The Outer Realm. We're broadcasting live on the United Public Radio Network, UFO Paranormal Radio Network, 105.3 from the Gulf Coast and 107.7 FM from New Orleans. We are fully sponsored by the amazing folks over at Folgers Coffee, who have been a part of our journey since the very beginning. So thank you, Folgers. We couldn't do it without you, nor would we want to. Also, big thank you to Dr. Snick, the sonic surgeon, aka Justin Snicker, for his contribution of his time, his music, and his voice for the intro that you just heard. He's an award-winning composer of Halloween, horror, sci-fi, and dark wave electronic music, which can be found on all of your favorite music streaming platforms. Also, thank you to Steve McGinnis, the artist behind the banners and logos here at the show. Check him out on Facebook and Instagram. Does great commission pieces. However, he does specializes in the horror genre as well. So, guys, of course, we've been kind of harping about this a little bit, but we are pleased to announce that we are sponsoring the upcoming event Contact and Disclosure Symposium 2024, which is taking place on April 20th at the Off-Road Bar in Toronto, Ontario. It's a day event from 10 until 5, so check them out. We'll flash the website up across the show board at some point through the night, so please check it out. Also, happy to announce that we're sponsoring for the second year in a row the Halifax Paranormal Symposium, which is going to be held on Saturday, October 12th at the Halifax Tower Hotel and Conference Center from 9 a.m. until 6 p.m. So as we start getting guest information, we will start putting up for everybody to see, but we'd like to give lots of notice so you can go and check them out. Now, tonight, for the very first time, we are welcoming Dan Shaw. This guy is just the expert go-to guy on Vortexes. He's written several books. He's been on Brad Meltzer's Decoded, The Devil's Triangle of Alaska. And he's been on Mysteries of National Parks, Yosemite, on the Travel Channel. He's been on the documentary Ancient Tomorrow. He consults on TV shows, including NBC's The Blacklist. So lots to talk about. But in order to do so, guys, you're going to have to go to our at least you're going to have to go to, one of our streaming platforms. But catch us right now. Main chat room is going to be on, sorry, I'm just sort of juggling things, of course, on YouTube. But you can find us on Roku. And by the way, you can find our archives on Roku as well. So UFO Paranormal, UFO Gods and Extraterrestrials, Canada's Most Haunted, The Outer on Facebook, United Public Radio, UFO Undercover. So lots of places to check us out. But remember, while we're communicating, guys, it's like the superhighway going down to one lane. We'll get to people as we can. I may flash your comments up here and there, and happy to do so. So people are chiming in. Hello, Adrienne. Hello, nice to see you. Hi, Doreen. Nice to see you as well. Lady Spider Witch, nice to see you as well. Hello, Guardian. Yes, so people are going to definitely start chiming in. And Amelia, of course, is going to try to pop in at some point during the show. But in the meantime, we're all going to have a great time. So without further ado, hi, Kathy, how are you? Dan is in the house, so let's bring him on. Hello. How are you?
Everybody. I'm so excited to be here.
Woohoo! I'm really excited to have you here. Yeah, let's do it. I like it. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I've really been looking forward to this because I'm just I do a lot of energy work, planetary stuff, and I love connecting to all of these fantastic power spots and ley lines. But there's so much to know. Like you sent so much information. I'm just like, oh my God, where do we even start with it? Like I see like a part 2 or 3. It's just great info.
Well, let's start with part one.
Yes, let's do that. Let's start with part 1. So how does one just fall into the research of, you know, vortexes, ley lines? Because there's a lot of really in-depth information with all of this. And, there's not been a lot of people who have delved into this.
Yes, yes. It's not just one thing or one or two things, but sequence of a lifetime of things that led
Right.
me here. And it's a long time unwinding, but I feel that it goes back beyond this life into before this life or maybe past lives. I had some kind of agreement because the way this work, this what I call the vortex work, the way it was delivered to me was it was just handed to me on a silver platter at a time when I was at my darkest hour. And it
Wow.
has buoyed me up and carried me ever since for some 35 years. I had some prior experience before the Vortex maps came to me. I had some study of alchemy. And
Ah,
so and so when I saw how these places were connected in this geometric way, I saw that as an alchemical tool, and geomancy, of course, earth magic is a subset of alchemy.
right.
So to me it made sense as a way to be working in the field of alchemy, to be working with these places, these maps, these ideas, and these people.
Right.
And it just continues to bring me into contact with all sorts of amazing people. And my journey has been very much of a sidestep into it, in that everybody comes to it from a different direction. I didn't have a time slip experience or
Hmm.
something of that nature. I didn't have your classic kind of vortex supernatural gateway experience at first that I know of, but eventually I've become more and more sensitive to these energies and studied with a lot of great people and become began to understand how to work with these energies and continue to learn every day from people such as yourself who are in other places. They're the feet on the ground.
Right.
And I'm curious, like, where did it begin for you? When did you first have this experience of, wow, this place, I feel like this place is making me feel something? I think I'm real curious, and I'm sure your listeners too.
Right.
Everybody's got, I mean, unless they don't, people have an experience where, oh my gosh, this place is just making me feel this.
No, for me, I was probably about, I don't know, 13, 12. We went on a family vacation. I think we were up near Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan. We were at a place there. I wish I could remember it, but it was like one of those mystery spots, where you go in and the broom stands up by itself and you're just like, what? You're 12 going, what am I seeing? It
Hmm.
was like really fabulous. But it did make me feel strange. And then I spent 30 years living at a location where, one major street away was another one of those power spots. And of course, there were all these tales about, oh, the car's going backwards. And I always used to kind of giggle about it. I knew it was one of these power spots. And I work with a lot of film students because I've done a lot of television, and they video recorded their car literally going uphill by itself. And that made me a believer.
A believer in what, though? Because that's a very particular kind of, to my mind,
Yeah.
we're talking about gravity,
Yeah.
pulling not down so much as towards the center of mass.
Right.
So that's, take a minute just to unwrap that. But for the people who haven't seen these cars rolling uphill, there are many places around where if you put your car in neutral, it will apparently roll uphill. And I'm convinced that
Interesting.
at some of those places, at least, it's not an optical illusion, but your car is actually rolling uphill and having to do with there's some kind of landform, some kind of extreme change in elevation where essentially the vector of gravity that is going
Right.
like left and right there's some component which is not zero.
Right.
Gravity's measured in all three axes, X, Y, and Z axes.
It was magnetic hill is what they called it, and there was always these stories and tales, but, it's one of those things, it's just like many other places in the world that, okay, well, I need to sort of see it, and did a lot of stories on it, presented it, to media, things like that. People were always curious about it, but that was the first for me, and they were psychology students who were doing a parapsychology, you know, excerpt for their course, and they asked if they could follow along, and they got that. So I never really gave much thought to there being different types of energy. Well, I mean, there's different types of energy, but you're talking about, the gravity, and there's a lot to it, is basically what I'm trying to say. It's not so black and white. There's a lot of gray in the middle, right?
A lot of different kinds of vortexes, if you ask me.
Right.
Of course, you have the normal everyday kind of vortex, which is a vortex of water or air, whirlwind or a whirlpool.
Right.
Normal kind of vortex.
Right.
And what I'm talking about, though, when I say vortex, is some kind of place which has some kind of energy. And I start with looking at geophysical energies, electromagnetic energies, but I don't stop there. I go on and look at finer energies such as consciousness and magic.
Right. Right. No, I'm in agreement with that. Absolutely. I'm one that I'm open to many different things, because you see, when you work with energy, you can see a lot of different aspects of it. And I'm also an enthusiast and researcher of ancient history, and how I always found it fascinating how the ancients would always build these incredible monoliths or monuments in power spots. They would always seem to know, and they go right back, even allegedly, to the Temple of Solomon, that they had a room where people were coming in and out of some kind of a stargate or portal. I mean, there's a lot of stories about this. So I guess before we get too far ahead of ourselves, this is a question I was going to ask. What's the difference between a vortex and a portal? Probably the most common question, because it was one of the first that came to me.
What's the difference between a vortex and a portal?
Yeah.
Well, shout out to your sometimes sponsor, Folgers Coffee.
Our everyday sponsor. Thank you. Cheers.
Cheers.
Mm. You can do us a Folgers commercial.
Your
Advertise yourself.
your everyday sponsor, Folgers.
Absolutely.
Right. Certainly, there are plenty of myths and legends and experiences that people have had of what I call a supernatural doorway, where there's some kind of time slip, where people experience showing up in a totally different place in no time, or they experience being in a different place in less time than it should have taken, or lost time, different kinds of time slips. And an equivalent thing, I think, in space. Certainly, I have it from credible witnesses that such things exist. There are essentially tears in the veil between dimensions, or glitches in the matrix, where it is possible to go on a one-way trip. And so I wouldn't toy with these things lightly, for sure. But that's not what brings me to vortexes exactly. I come to it from a standpoint of alchemy, of perfecting our physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual bodies towards our physical immortality and our ascension. And I have an elevator pitch, which is this: there's an infinite amount of energy available everywhere, all the time, for our physical healing, our psychic opening, and for harmonizing the planet. So you could say that my primary interest is these so-called you could say lesser vortexes, not the interdimensional supernatural doorway type vortexes, but more everyday vortexes that occur everywhere.
Mhm.
And I take a very scientific approach. I like to think what I'm doing is the science behind Earth magic.
Right.
And got a degree in geography so I could better understand and explain these things. And I hold that there is an essential unity,
Mm.
a relationship of unity between our physical body, our electromagnetic body, our electromagnetic living cells, and the geophysical energies, the earth energies and sun energies and all kinds of energies all around us. We live in a churning ocean of these energies, and they affect us and we affect them.
Mhm.
We affect each other. There's no separation. Full
Right.
stop.
Right.
So that's how I approach it, and yet I'm convinced. I'm convinced that supernatural doorways do exist. Do exist.
That is always fascinating to me because I've heard of 2 personal stories from people who have seemed to have slipped somewhere, or I guess a time slip, and then they could hear people calling them, but they're not around, and then they run back around counterclockwise around the house, and they come back, and their family is like, "Well, where were you? This is a child after all." And he goes, "I don't know, I could hear you." He goes, "Well, you've been gone for 2 hours." And the kid's like, "No, man, I've only ran around the house one time and came back." So you have that
You have
time lapse.
you have more than one story like that?
Yeah, there was a couple. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
and
I
this
don't
this
like to
was a
call.
personal, the one I just told was a personal story from a family friend.
Yeah, I
There's a
I
couple.
actually I prefer to call it an experience rather than a story.
Right.
There's
Yes.
By running in or walking in a circle, you establish a vortex, you yourself.
Wow.
and we can and I had the good fortune to listen to a show you did a year ago with Hamilton White talking
Yeah, he's a good
talking
friend.
talking about the landscape geometries in France. And
Yes.
boy, I would certainly love to talk about that more. And you bring
Please.
up the point of, how did they know to build their monuments with such exquisite precision? And
Yes.
yet, you and I both, I think, have established and kind of an exquisite sensitivity to these earth energies. And you say you see the energies, and everybody senses these energies in different ways. Can you say something more about how you see them?
It's not so much that I see them all the time, but for me, when I see something, it looks like heat coming in off of a hot pavement or a hot sidewalk. It just warbles up, and it's distorted. That to me, I'm just kind of like, okay, that's something. I don't think I'll walk around it. Sorry,
That can be a good idea. Uh, so,
right.
so if I could reflect back to you that's a real common way that people do see these energies. And I worked for a couple seasons at the Montana Vortex in Columbia Falls, Montana, which is a genuine, some kind of magnetic anomaly, which is opened as a tourist attraction. And in a very few minutes, we can teach people to see energies.
Mm,
And for many people, it does look exactly as you're describing, like a kind of a heat mirage,
yes.
these waving lines of heat where things maybe look slightly out of focus if you kind of look past them. It's different for everybody. Some people can feel the energies in
Mhm.
various ways. So it doesn't require dowsing rods necessarily or any kind of
Well, you
technology.
are, I think, the dowsing rod,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Or sometimes you can feel. For me, with ley lines, I feel a pull right in the core. I feel myself being pulled forward by them. I mean, I
Mhm.
can actually see myself. I used to do tours, and one of the spots was an allegedly a ley line, and the people from City Hall are the ones at the time in the city who told us about, these stories, and they would sometimes look out in the courtyard and find people in period clothing just pop out of nowhere, like they just this little time distortion. And they would come once a year on a tour with new stories. But what was interesting is as people stood around in the circle of the courtyard, you would see them start moving like this, and they didn't even realize that at one point I was sure one woman was going to just kiss the ground. And she looked at me and I looked at her and I went, "Timber." And she looked down and she couldn't believe how close she was.
Oh,
And
wow.
she was like she goes, "I feel like I'm being pulled." And that's the only way I can
Yeah.
describe it.
Well, that's super common at Vortexes, for people to have that sense that they are leaning, and that's documentable with photographs. We do find people lean, and again, that comes back to what we sense as being down.
Right.
Gravity is actually, not straight down, but it's gravity is affected by the oceanic tides and that twice or a daily bulge and
Mm,
that daily cycle that looks like a sine wave of the oceanic tides.
right.
The Depending on where the moon is, the actual gravity center of the earth is rotating around throughout the day.
Right.
So gravity is a lot more complicated than we tend to think of, and
Right.
that does, to my mind, that's part of the vortex effect, because whether you're up on a mountain peak or you're down in a cave, you're being affected very, very differently by gravity. And
Hmm.
that's got to have an effect on all the cells in your brain and how you're thinking and feeling.
I would think so. I would think so. Um, Kathy, hello. Are ley lines the same as vortexes?
Ah, good. Yes, we did kind of skip right into what are ley lines. And people, there's, as with vortexes, I think to be precise, there's a narrow term of the word and a broad term of the word. So ley
Right.
lines, to be precise, or lays, these are rifle straight alignments of points, either natural points or built features,
Mm,
which are intervisible on the landscape. As you move from one place to the next, you can actually see that next monument on the horizon. And this always raises the question of, if we're just looking at alignments of points, natural and built points, how do we know that we're not just seeing some random alignment on the landscape?
mm,
That's a perfectly valid question. And the answer is, when you're establishing these kinds of straight alignment patterns, you're looking for a statistically significant number of points in a very small distance.
mm.
So there's your answer. When you're looking at a landscape with all kinds of what I call vortex markers, mountain peaks, caves, or in mineral deposits,
Mm.
cultural sites, um, paranormal occurrences might be one, graveyards, historic sites,
So
parks,
areas of high strangeness, essentially.
areas of high strangeness, places
Missing
with some
persons.
geologic uniqueness,
Mm,
and places you can actually see on a magnetic map, because we do all kinds of magnetic mapping. You can get magnetic maps, and soil maps can be very useful too to see subsurface features, because these ley lines or these energy lines aren't just on the surface, but these are three-dimensional things where we think of a line of energy. if it's an actual global ley line, it's going to be like an equator. It's going to go all the way around the earth.
mm,
And there's a number of systems for this, geometric systems for these. Basically, there's a cubical system, a tetrahedral system, the tetrahedron being that four-sided platonic solid that is triangles on all
mm,
sides, like a triangle-based pyramid. Your dodecahedron, your icosahedron, these all have earth grid systems associated with them.
mm,
So they can look like these geometric shapes when you look at them one way, but when you look at them another way, they look like a set of equators or great circles around the earth, these global ley lines.
right.
But then there's all kinds of other energy patterns. There's sinuous, snake-like lines, which technically aren't ley lines. There's all kinds of circles and concentric circles and overlapping circles and 5, 6, 7, 8 10-pointed stars,
Hmm.
etc. So I'm
Hmm.
interested in all of these geometries. Obviously, there's something to be read into the sacred geometry itself, and then
Oh,
something more
yes.
when it's overlaid on the landscape.
Yes.
And this whole
Like the
question,
tree of life.
very much like the tree of life.
Hmm.
In fact, this system that, uh, if I can rotate the camera,
Of course.
I published this map, which is the Becker-Hagen's Earth Star Globe.
Oh, wow.
It's comes flat, as you see, and then it folds up into a globe.
Right.
It's a geometric thing. It purports to show both the natural geometry of the Earth,
Right. Right.
as well as the location of many, many ancient monuments on these intersections, correspondence with wind and water currents, and seismicity, earthquakes and volcanoes at these deep sea trenches, corresponding with geometry in many
Hmm.
places, etc.
Right.
So this is the dodecahedron icosahedron pair of solids in this version of the globe. But when you zoom in, there's finer lines on this model, and then there's many, many more local models, such as this other one you see above
Right.
it. A little bit of glare on that, but that is
Right.
the Earth Star North America,
Right. Wow.
which is another map I published
Right.
showing the 19 mountains
The
and
people
bodies
have
of
no
water.
idea just how many lines there actually are, because I've seen some of the stuff that you've sent, and it's fascinating to me because for example, when you think about triangles, you get into basically some, pretty generic, you have all the popular ones, of course, like the Bermuda Triangle, the um, arc why am I doing why am I brain farting? Sorry. The
Bridgewater Triangle,
Alaska, Bridgeport,
Alaska.
Nevada. Yeah, there's a Yosemite. It's like Devil's Triangle. There's all kinds of them. But
We could speak
but
to that for sure.
you have, like, they're everywhere.
Well, the number of different systems of mapping these energy patterns is does get to be kind of overwhelming and beggar the imagination, because there just seems to be no end of it.
Well, I just
But
looked at your map of Mount Shasta, and it was just like here, 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 like the different mountain peaks in the area. Like it just Mount Shasta seemed to zing off in a couple of different directions, which is fascinating to me because it's such a crazy area, shall we say?
well, it is highly energetic.
It sure
It
is.
does play a part in a bunch of different geometric patterns.
Yeah.
I have what I like to think is a pretty rigorous approach to the subject, and so when we're talking about triangles, it's important to talk about, well, why triangles? What kind of triangles are we talking about? How
Right.
accurate are they? So I have a theorem, a hypothesis about why equilateral triangles are important, and it's follows a musical analogy, or essentially a radio broadcasting, like an antenna broadcasting analogy, which is that if you have a broadcast point, you're going to set up a certain kind of a waveform, but it's not going to be very stable. If you have 2 points, again, you get a certain kind of broadcast pattern, but again, not very stable. In fact, when you have 2 points broadcasting, what you have is you have two kinds of interference. You
Mm.
have constructive interference where it adds up, essentially doubling, if you set up the right arrangement, right? You
Mhm.
have destructive interference where it essentially zeroes out. You have like a null zone. And then you
Mhm.
have essentially the negative number in this
Right.
waveform as well. So just based on the idea of, like, we've got two different broadcasting points, that sets us up with like three different kinds of vortexes,
Mm.
which you could say are like positive, negative, and neutral, or you could classify them any number of ways. But point
Right.
being that when you get 3 points in an equilateral triangle broadcasting the same signal, now you've got some real coherent signal, stable waveform. So to
Mm.
me, if you have an equilateral triangle, that's a real strong marker of a vortex, but I'm looking for many other vortex markers as well.
Mhm.
Usually if you see that 3, that's a good indication. You can draw a circle around that, and you may see confirmation in that inverted triangle that makes the 6-pointed star,
Right.
for
Right.
example. And there's
Right.
kind of triangles that are, I think, important. The 3, 4, 5 triangle, for example, is one that recurs.
Right. Right.
Mhm.
Mark says there's a triangle off the west coast of Ireland. Yeah, I did not know there was a triangle off the coast of Ireland. Mind you, from what I'm learning tonight, I didn't know there was. I thought I knew a lot of this stuff was. I'm sorry. I'm kind of like, no, I don't think I do. so, um, so before we get too far ahead, I've had 2 people asking, well, what is a lesser vortex and how do you find one?
Mhm. Sure, sure. So anywhere where you have a magnetic signature, which is different from the surrounding area, you have a kind of a magnetic anomaly.
Mm,
You tend to experience the change of energy as you move from kind of one kind of environment to another. So you'll often
mm,
have this experience, say, at the threshold between the valley and the mountain,
right,
or at the edge of a cliff, let's say, or the beach.
right.
You'll have this experience of moving from one kind of energy to another more readily than you'll have an experience of kind of the energy that you live in every day.
Mhm,
So you're moving across the landscape. You're going someplace where you're at a different elevation. There's at a different density, temperature.
mm,
There's a different electrical charge in the air. There's different electrical ions in the air. Yeah, different minerals in the soil. All these things
mm,
you're exposing yourself to. Uh, Breathing the air, taking in the colors, maybe drinking the water if it's safe to do that, eating a little bit of wild edibles if those are in abundance.
right,
Uh,
right.
those kinds of things really stillness, coming to the place with real love,
Mm.
leaving it cleaner than you found it, all
So
these
your
ways.
energy, frequency, vibration connects essentially with that of the area that you're in that could so if you come across there's like a lesser vortex, a vortex, anything energizing, we are made up of energy and water. And if I imagine, at least for some of us, it's very easy to connect to these places.
That that would be a real gift to have ease in connecting to the place. So many of us are so disconnected from our place.
Right.
There's that real kind of sense of placelessness that comes.
Hmm.
But these places they are everywhere, and you don't have to travel to the Bermuda Triangle or some exotic place in
Right.
order to connect with the place. People
Right.
often ask, "What is the most powerful vortex?" And I sincerely believe that is our own heart.
uh
We ourselves are vortexes. We impact everything around us. We're not separate. We impact the
hmm.
place. We leave our energy wherever we go, for better or worse,
Yes. Yes.
until we're perfect, and
Right.
maybe even then.
I
Uh,
know. But it sure
hopefully,
is fun to
hopefully,
try. Right.
yeah.
Right.
So I've written a number of books,
Hmm.
which you can see at vortexmaps.com.
Right.
When people email me, I'll send them a free ebook link to download.
Right.
When your listeners email me, I'll send them. I think I'll send them how vortexes affect us,
Right.
which is, and I'm sorry if my chair is squeaking a little bit.
No, that's
Um,
okay. That's
I've
okay.
uh, I've put together a book called How Vortexes Affect Us. I'll send you a link to download this ebook for free when you email me.
There, I'll put the
And the
email up in the
email,
chat.
great. I'll just mention it's energy@vortexmaps.com, and I will answer every email. And that explains the many, many dozens of factors which contribute to this electromagnetic ocean in which we swim.
Right.
And so there are Of course, the electromagnetic field is, primarily driven by Earth and Sun, but there are
Mm.
dozens of other things. I've already mentioned a number of them:
Mm.
elevation, ions in the air, and such.
Mm.
And to my mind, this is a pretty good start at explaining how places can make us feel things. But we can go a lot farther and talk about how we can use ourselves and our intentions and our devices and our ceremonies and such to uplift the whole planet.
Well, I definitely want to touch on as much as we can because it's all fascinating. And it brings me to this, I guess, which is in tune to where we're going. She was at a metaphysical shop. Hi, Adrienne, saw a portal straight up from the floor behind the counter. The owner was shocked. She says it's where she prayed to a goddess every morning. So essentially created a portal. Intention? Thoughts? Intention, we can create a portal?
Absolutely, for sure.
Yeah.
Thoughts have form. Thoughts have
Yes.
form.
Right.
And I've seen it happen that people come into the Montana vortex,
Hmm.
and it's as though the vortex really likes them, and the vortex, the demonstrations are very dramatic, and
Oh,
other people come in and they're very skeptical, and the demonstrations don't seem to hardly work at all. Uh,
interesting. That's interesting. Let me ask you this, and I'll tell you why I'm asking in a moment. Do portals have sound?
oh, I would say for sure. Now, have I? What do I think a portal sounds like, or have I heard a portal? No.
Okay.
I've had some paranormal. I've heard some paranormal things. For example, Bigfoot at the Montana Vortex. I'm 100% convinced. I've heard a Bigfoot call out there. I was
Mm.
living there for some while, but I do have some reports of people reporting that vortexes may look like you say, that shimmering
Yeah.
bit, or a blue mist is another thing that people describe.
Okay. Okay.
But why do you ask about sound though? Because again, everybody senses these things differently.
Right.
Hmm.
Right. Well, I spent some time at the Hoyabatsu forest in Romania. It's like allegedly the most haunted forest in the world. And we found out after the fact, because I don't like to know a whole lot about a place until after I've been. It is Romania's Bermuda Triangle. There are lots of stories of people disappearing. One was that of a little girl who disappeared at 5 years old, came back 5 years later, still 5 years old, and totally like spaced out. She just wasn't the same mentally or emotionally. Another story of a shepherd and his flock, and everybody just disappeared. So when I was there, um, very, very quiet. There's a spot in the forest where nothing really grows, grass, weeds, the trees are all crooked and bent out of shape. And it made a droning sound. It was silent, no birds, no animals. They were probably off outside the circle, but we could see insects, but you didn't see little squirrels or anything running around, no birds, you didn't hear them. And the sound was like kind of like a droning like this. Mm, 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 mm. It just kept going. Mm, mm, mm. Just and after a while, like, if you focused on it, it would just drive you crazy. But if you just after a while, you just stop paying attention to it because I was there for quite a few hours, but it had this droning, like a humming.
Okay. Couple things. I mean, you've if we could unpack what you've said.
Sure.
I've already kind of alluded to the idea that you we may have three different qualities of vortexes. Vortexes aren't
Ooh.
necessarily always good for us. I One of my principles is anything that can heal can kill.
Oh, yes.
So some place may be good for you at a certain time and not at another time, or good for you but not for this other person.
Right.
So when you go to a place, you need to be aware of how it is affecting you and not overstay your welcome either.
Right.
So there's that element there, and you're describing to me, you're describing a vortex which is not necessarily good for life.
Right.
This is similar to the Oregon vortex, where uh, I've heard it on a firsthand account that it's true that horses do not like to go into this vortex,
Hmm.
and so that's not uncommon. It is also common for at a positive vortex, people often will experience relief from symptoms such as pain
Mm.
or ringing in the ears.
I have that most of the time. I'm very sensitive to frequencies. I can listen to music and just hear the frequency in the song. Like I'm just funny like that.
Hmm.
you know. But I did not I did have that a little bit over there. For me, I mean, I had a nap there. I felt very comfortable there, but it's a very high active area. Locals have captured photos of, crafts over top. If it's
Hmm.
under no-fly zone, it has to make you wonder exactly what's under the mountain. But we could see everything would fly around it, planes. No one ever came over it.
Are we still talking about Michigan?
No, no, sorry, Hoyabatsu,
I'm sorry. Okay,
Romania.
and where's Ukraine? Sorry.
Yeah,
Okay,
no, Romania.
Rom- I apologize.
That's okay.
I get a
It's
little
close.
excited. I get
It's
a little
close.
excited.
Right.
I was harking back to what you were saying about Michigan, and there are two tourist attractions there, which are
Yes.
genuine vortexes.
Yes. Well, that's where I was on the first mystery spot when I was about
Hmm.
12.
Hmm. Mystery
Was
Spot,
in
Michigan.
Michigan,
Yeah.
near Sioux, Michigan.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah,
yeah.
Upper
So,
Peninsula, they say.
right.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. I was just curious because I never really had anyone to ask, is do they emit some kind of sound, or is it just that I was sensitive to the vibration and maybe that's how I was hearing it?
Well, there again, everybody senses it in different ways. I am not
Right.
so lucky as to be able to see the energies. For me, it's I often get a tingling in my face, my nose, my third eye, my
Right.
jaw.
Right.
Some people may feel like a warmth or a cool breeze, a
Mm,
magnetic push or pull. It's just different
right.
people sense it in different ways.
Okay. So while on the topic of vortexes, what are your thoughts on crop circles?
Okay, well, for me, it's all vortexes, all 24/7. But I do
Right.
everything seems to overlap,
Yes.
touch a tangent to everything in the paranormal field. It does seem to touch on paranormal places and vortexes.
Energy for
Certainly,
me.
crop circles, and
Yeah.
I it would be wrong for me to say I have no opinion about crop circles.
Okay, I thought I would ask
But I
because it's
yeah,
for me,
that's
you're always looking for the natural reason for
right,
why things
right,
happen,
right,
right? So,
right. So for me, a couple possibilities. One, first of all, I'm completely convinced that these things are somehow anomalous because when I look at them, I feel the energy from them. I'm sensitive enough to
yes.
energy that, when I look at one that's clunky, I know
Right.
it's not vibrating like a harp. I can tell
Right.
the other ones, and when you look into it and the way the crops are deformed and everything else. So
Right.
totally convinced that. So for me, two possibilities. One is it's the natural intelligence of the earth itself in some kind of geometric energy discharge. And that would be, I think, a far cry. I mean, they're so elaborate. They
Yes.
look like shadows of a four-dimensional shape. Yeah.
Right.
So I'm tending towards, and since I have experience of, I have seen a craft
Me too.
when I was 14 years old,
Right.
totally convinced. Couldn't not nothing else, just some
Me too.
lights below the horizon, lights, panel of lights flashing on and off for a moment, very, very similar to the ones in Close Encounters, but
Right.
colored lights. Don't know if it had any kind of association with Vortex, but maybe some kind of interdimensional or faster than light craft or something
Right.
huge on the mountainside behind my childhood home. So I have that experience, all this disclosure stuff. I'm like, it should have come, when I was 14,
Mhm.
you know, uh, it can't come soon enough as far as I'm concerned.
I'm
Uh,
the same. I'm an experiencer as well of
yeah,
extraterrestrials and
yeah.
crafts, and I'm quite comfortable with it now, but, since
So,
childhood.
so crop circles, to answer your question, I
Yeah,
think they could be intelligently designed by some
right,
kind of, whether you're talking about inner Earth being, break
right,
off civilization. I think those are kind of pretty highly likely.
right,
Extraterrestrial, so-called beings,
right.
beings from some other time doing that.
Yes.
Why? I think, and here's to my mind is kind of the most interesting point is that this is a kind of gentle ontological shock, a gentle disclosure for people to gradually open up to a more multidimensional reality than the one we currently are living in.
Right. I am in complete agreement. As an experiencer, I know. Let's do it. As an experiencer, I think once you come to terms with the fact that it's there and very much present in our space, that accepting it actually has a very comforting feel to it after a while. Right. And I mean, that's my personal view. I didn't feel like that. I mean, I had all this as a child, and as an adult, I'm like, that's intrusive. Stay out of my house. It started getting a little, I know. But then I became very comfortable, and so anyway, long story short, I think it's good to be open-minded. But back to vortexes. Uh
Yeah, if we could just actually stitch that up between crop circles and vortexes, which I kind of failed to do
yes.
so far, and that is that what would be the relationship between energetic places and vortexes? Do we have any research indicating that there's that correlation? And we do have some
Mhm.
in a researcher whose name was Kursana Duran, and she did posit some relationships actually between earthquakes and eclipses
Ah,
and crop circles. And
right.
it was beyond me to understand the material she did put out, but I have preserved it I will be publishing it
Mm,
on my website on vortexmaps.com. But she did suggest that there is a cycle that we should be on the lookout for, which, although I'm not totally clear on whole geography of the whole thing, we should, on a time cycle,
mhm.
post eclipse, 26 days after the eclipse, we might expect some kind of so-called earth changes or earthquakes,
Hmm. Interesting. Well,
so to
I'm
speak.
keeping in tune with the eclipse that just occurred. I mean, Taiwan had a big earthquake, New York and part of Pennsylvania felt that earthquake. Somebody in out near California, way out western United States, reported
Sure.
a lot of tornadoes happening,
Yeah.
all on the heels of this event.
Sure.
So
Right.
got to be
But
something to it,
sure. But sussing out any science around it is pretty tough. So I'll withhold my judgment.
right? But by YouTube, otherwise, right? God, they're pretty sensitive about things
It's
these days.
really it's really hard to tell.
Oh, I know, I
Hard.
know. Adrian says, I saw a portal in a chamber in New York that twisted my stomach like a wet rag. A south portal saw a revolving elliptical mini planetary system revolving over it. Well, jeepers, that's not something you see every day.
That is a lot. That is a lot to share. Thanks for sharing that. Thank
You're
you.
right.
And I get these kinds of emails quite regularly, and where people are sharing their paranormal experience. And because I have had miracles of my own, I have a very high level of credulity. I'm hard pressed to disbelieve anything because I myself am living in this kind of shamanic reality where there's kind of many different realities going on.
Right,
Now,
right.
there's, in my opinion, we'll see if I can how well I can tie this into the experience Adrienne just shared.
Mm-hmm.
Adrienne, if I'm saying that right.
Adrian. Yes.
The vortexes have a cycle of their own of, I would say, charging and discharging. So they have a kind of a biorhythm of their own. So if you are, um, I'm not sure what kind of chamber we're in,
I was
but
wondering about that.
if you're in a location which you feel has some energy, that energy is going to have some kind of a time cycle to it, which we often find that cycle is something like 6.5 or 7 minutes on that short duration cycle. Um,
Hmm.
but
Interesting.
if, oh, now she says South Portal, which is
Yes, this
also
is
an
South
interesting
Portal.
kind of a thing. So now I'll just kind of deconstruct that a little bit more. And if you think of, our perception as being very much kind of two-dimensional. If we think about like this vortex looks like this circle, it's got a diameter of on the ground. If we draw a circle of 54 miles, that's real common. Here's a 54-mile diameter vortex. Here's a 108-mile diameter vortex.
Mhm.
Here's a 216-mile diameter vortex. It looks like a circle on the ground, but it's actually a sphere. Kind of the same way that our ley lines are not just kind of a pencil line on the surface, but they are actually above the surface and below the surface as well. They're maybe more than three-dimensional. So our
Mhm.
vortex then, this particularly turbulent area of energy, maybe electromagnetic plus energy, is possibly more like a toroidal shape, that torus or donut shape. And we're just kind of looking at one slice of it, and it looks as though it's either spiraling up or spiraling down, in or out, clockwise or anti-clockwise,
Mhm.
kind of our perception, based on our perception of where we are relative to that phenomena.
Mhm.
So there's that going on. So South Portal, not totally clear on exactly what that would mean, but then this sense that there's something from some other dimension coming through, that is not uncommon. Although the description of like a planetary system on the other side, that
Mhm.
one's that one's unique for
It,
sure. That experience.
and she was in an ancient stone chamber.
Oh,
So
ancient stone chamber in New York. Okay, so maybe we're talking upstate New York. So now we're in great territory because there's all kinds of stone chambers and stone features, so-called stone walls in the Northeast, New England area. And these are pretty inexplicable. They do not seem to be walls as we understand them. There's these features, these so-called walls seem to let some of them end in like snakehead effigies, and so they kind of look snakish, and some of them have this undulating kind of a effect to them. So those chambers, those are brilliant. We're not talking like colonial rock chambers, but some other kind of Native American or prehistoric
which
chambers
is
that are
pretty intense.
built in a certain way. They have a certain effect on the electrical ions in the air. They stratify the ions in the air. They may have been used for certain ritual purposes in
Mm.
ancient times. We're not quite sure on. We don't seem to find a common alignment to them. These stone chambers in Northeast and upstate New York, people have looked for like, do these things face commonly to like solstice or equinox? Uh,
Mhm.
I'm not familiar with anything showing that, but
Right.
thank you for that clarification because that does open up that whole question of these chambers. They look like the same kinds of chambers that we find in Europe, sometimes below ground, earthen covered, but sometimes exposed, that we see like one large stone on top of a numerous smaller stones. And we have some of those in New Hampshire. Uh,
Mhm.
we have a balanced rock, and um, forget if it's called balanced rock exactly, but
Mm.
we have these similar features which look as though they may once have been covered with earth but are now exposed. So that's a little hard to tell.
Now,
Uh,
have you done research at American Stonehenge?
I haven't done research there. I've visited. It's pretty well destroyed, but there's definitely some remaining stuff there to be seen and learned.
Right.
Yeah,
I know that, I mean, Dennis is the owner has been on the show a few times and goes,
yeah,
they're still trying to uncover things
sure.
like, because we know there's more and there's mounds and there's all kinds of things. But I mean, you have how many 100 acres? It's kind of hard to, I mean, you can only imagine. It's easy to imagine what's under there, but I imagine it would be quite an undertaking. Um, Adrian says if crop circles are created in a circular or spiral pattern, it would make sense that they created by a vortex, which was my thought, which is why I had asked it for the spiral ones, if it was something possible
Well,
as well.
she actually says, if I read it right, it would make sense that they, meaning the crop circles, created the vortex. And that's entirely possible. If I take a piece of paper and I draw a circle
Okay.
on it, I've created a vortex of a certain
Okay.
kind, depending on my intent and how energetic the materials and everything else. You can
Right.
also consider that if this is an intelligent entity or being,
Right.
imprinting these geometric patterns, these sacred harmonic proportions into these crops, then they are in effect activating our crops, our farmland, and our food supply.
That would make sense. That would make sense as well. It's energy based. It's all so fascinating. I think it has a lot of I mean, it's endless when you talk about even your book, gardening. Was Stonehenge? Is that what it was? I love that because I'm thinking like it's just energy, energy. Everything needs energy. Energy sustains everything.
Well, that does need some explaining, actually, because
Okay.
the book,
What kind
the
of
book,
gardening?
uh,
Uh,
um,
mhm.
no, but yeah, if you say so, though. But the I've written a book. It's called Stonehenge Gardening Tips: Using Earth Energies in Your Garden.
Right.
So the idea is that just as the ancients built monuments such as Stonehenge to enliven all the living things in their landscape, we can do similar same thing in our own gardens.
Right.
So I deconstruct Stonehenge. That's kind of the poster child of all ancient monuments, some other ancient monuments as well. Look at how they built up the earth and dug out the ditch and brought in the stones and the shape of the stones and the material of the
Mm,
stones and its own pattern and its relationship to other monuments in the landscape and the acoustics of Stonehenge and etc. and how they might have created little microclimates and grown plants and such. So Stonehenge gardening tips, it's a little bit of a hard sell because it's this crossover title between gardening, it is, and Stonehenge. So where do you put it on your bookshelf? You'll need two copies, but the idea is that these monuments were built with an awareness of these geophysical energetic principles, and were built in such a way as to enhance all the living cells. So, what lessons can we learn from that?
mhm. Right. Right. I like it. I like it. So let's look. Let's go high strangeness for a little bit with
Sure.
some of these really, shall we say, energetic spots. I mean, we talked about Hoyabatsu. We can look at in the United States, for example, you have all of these national parks that seem to have a mix of everything. You have disappearances like the missing 411. You have Bigfoot seems to be everywhere. You have UFOs, you have
Yeah.
lights, you have specters, you have I mean, there's everything. So, do you think that these vortexes, I mean, are they supernatural? I mean, we know they're natural, but you know where I'm going with this? I'm just trying to think of a really delicate way to put it without sounding like it's too far out there.
Well, the subject, I mean, the subject has to arise.
Right.
What is the relationship between the place and the supernatural?
Thank you.
Obviously, supernatural things can and do occur everywhere. So,
Right.
what is the role of these energetic places? And
Yes.
I would say these places tend to be places where the veil between worlds is thin, and there is all kinds of strangeness. All kinds
Yes.
of things come through. You get UFOs and Bigfoot and Thunderbirds,
Yes.
and I was just listening to an interview from Joe Hauser, who's the owner of the Montana Vortex and a Bigfoot researcher, and he runs down all the phenomena he sees there at the Montana Vortex, which is on the river, the Flathead River there, and then Columbia Mountains right there. And it's part of
Yes.
this larger pattern, which I showed earlier about the
Yes.
points around the Grand Tetons. So, yes, there's this. Oh my gosh, it does seem like the alien highway in a certain sense, right? Like there's so many things intersecting there. And why is it that we're just blind to electromagnetism and these other creatures are actually able to see the electromagnetism and they're using it in some
Right.
way for navigation?
Mhm.
It's hard to say. I like to be real clear about when I'm speaking from my own experience, direct experience, and yet I have compiled so much research from so many brilliant researchers, but I just have to kind of keep, like swimming through all the paranormal
Right.
stuff to like, what is the influence of the place and
Yes.
what's our relationship to the place and how can we approach the place in a way that's going to enhance
Mhm.
our life and the life of the place.
Right. Right. Well, I know you do have a good blend of places that believe, you've got these portals that just, I mean, even animals are said by, I'll back up a bit. People who work, energy workers who work with the planet believe that even animals can slip through little portals. That's why some of them could just disappear so quickly. But Bigfoot, there have been remote viewers that have seen them just disappear. But never mind that you have something that just footsteps just stop. The prints are gone and they're
Mm-hmm.
just gone.
Mm-hmm.
So where do they go? Not up in the tree. People just don't see them. They're looking around. So what causes a portal? We can open portals, but can these vortexes create little offshoots?
Oh
Maybe.
gosh, I kind of want to leave that question hanging in a way, but I'll just
Okay.
answer with this other question, which is, first of all, the statement. There's so much division or diversity within the Bigfoot community alone. Uh, some folks would swear that Bigfoot is an orb. Yeah, that there's like essentially no separation there. That's
Hmm.
just like the same phenomena.
Like
That
quantum stuff.
orbs are somehow these interdimensional vehicles or like Merkaba or something like that.
Right.
So I again doing my best to reserve judgment on that manner of thing. But again, I did
Right.
have this
Right.
confluence between I was at the Montana Vortex.
Right.
They have Bigfoot sightings there.
Yes.
I heard something there one night that sound
Mm.
is very revealing, and I knew it wasn't anybody who was living there on the property with me,
Right.
or any
Right.
animal I'd ever heard of before. And
Right. Right.
so it's hard to say, hard to disbelieve anything, but that definitely there's something about these electromagnetic anomalies where
Mhm.
where paranormal stuff just seems to happen in spades.
Well, even like missing people, some of the stories that you hear from people who have been hiking with someone who say, I just turned around. They were literally like just 10, 15 feet behind me and they were just gone.
Well, the
So,
missing 411,
yeah,
David Polides,
yeah,
Polides,
yeah,
I forget how to say his name exactly. He
yeah.
ended up moving into the neighborhood of the Montana Vortex. He's like hanging out now with the owner there, Joe Hauser,
Right,
and he's for years being retired law enforcement. He was very super careful about how he phrased things,
right.
and still is, of course. But these absolutely otherwise inexplicable disappearances and sometimes reappearances
Mhm.
that he's tracked. Um, it's hard for me to see how those like fit on any kind of vortex map that I have. However,
Right.
he does draw a relationship with boulder fields,
Mm,
fields of boulders, which I find pretty telling because when I'm thinking of boulder fields, I'm thinking of highly energetic materials that may be magnetic, but more likely like piezoelectric granite that's
mhm.
been transported by glaciers, maybe, and set down somewhere else. So something that originally had a kind of a more or less uniform, if you can think of like a landscape that has kind of a uniform magnetic signature, then
Right.
being transported and tumbled and redeposited somewhere else as a boulder field. Now it's got this very highly dynamic, complex electromagnetic thing going on.
Hmm.
And to have him cite that as some relationship with inexplicable disappearances, I'm like, aha, that sounds like the vortex effect.
Right. Right. Well, I mean, it's not impossible, I guess, when you hear about people who fall into time slips and such. And I've told the story here a few times, about using a device. I'll leave it there because it'll kick us into a
Okay.
paranormal thing, which I don't want to do.
Okay.
But we tapped into what seemed to be a time slip because the communication that was coming through were these airline pilots for which sounded like they may have been from the war, and they almost sounded like from a total, 40s, 50s type of slang in their communication, and they could see us completely. And they kept describing what they were seeing, and I said, "What's your coordinates?" They kept saying, "It's all black." And they gave 2 out of 3 coordinates, which put them over the Pacific. And then it was just all of a sudden, they're like, "Look, there's a doorway," and I could hear the plane, the props from the plane. I'm like, "Don't go through the door." I had a vision to just come through the house, like, "Do not go through the door." Then they started pleading with me, and then they were just gone. And that planetary alignment, that when this happened, we tried to recreate it a year later exactly, and we could never get it back. Never. Ever, ever, ever. So it's just like a slip.
Dang, girl. That's one of the best vortex stories I'll ever hear right there. Vortex
Yeah.
experiences. Hmm.
I mean, I wasn't the only one sitting there, So it was an experience, and I thought to myself, at first I was just very uncertain, but we live in an incredible place. This planet itself is just an incredible living thing that has all of this energy projecting out in different ways. We project out energy in different ways, and some of us are fortunate enough to have a very strong connection to it all, which to me is phenomenal. But I don't know. I think there are people out there who just walk into these things and have absolutely no idea. Kathy has asked about the Coral Castle in Florida. This has come up on the show actually a few times over the course of the month, so it's become very popular. What she says is on the southwest tip of the Bermuda Triangle.
For sure, for sure. So I think of limestone as being not a very highly energetic material compared to like quartz crystal, which is piezoelectric. However, I've recently heard some researchers disagree and say, no, limestone is a highly energetic material. So, where we're
Mm,
going to find limestone is calcium carbonate, and we're finding it in Florida because it's essentially it's ancient seafloor. It's like the
mm,
bones of ancient sea creatures, right? So it's not going to ring like a bell to my thinking. Also, on the Giza Plateau, limestone.
yeah.
And in the south of France, we were talking about the limestone caves a year ago with Hamilton White, right?
Yeah, I've been to
Uh,
the south
so
of France. Yeah. Yeah.
so I envy you. So okay, so limestone in general, I think about, well, it's not that highly energetic. Now, it is very near that geometric point, which we think of as the Bermuda Triangle, and we could talk for some time about
Yeah.
why these geometric points seem energetic. But to
Right.
give you the kind of the fortune cookie version, shape has energy and energy has shape. So in the same way that a pyramid has a kind of energy associated with it, And that's partly because it's built of energetic materials and it's in a certain location and it's aligned a certain way with the cosmos. Yes. But even if you just take a copper wire pyramid and you wear it on your head,
Right.
and it's not aligned to north and south or whatever it is,
Right.
it's still going to have some energetic properties, and it's going to have uh, an energy according to what is that angle. Is it the right angle? Is it some other angle? Right,
Right.
right angle, no pun intended. Is it the
Right.
pyramid angle or some other angle?
Right.
So these points on the Earth, which are geometric points, have an energy to them, just as everything in creation has a geometry to it. Yes. So that Bermuda Triangle is a geometric, so-called Bermuda Triangle. That point or that area
Mm.
is has a geometric relationship. It's at a certain geometric point and has a specific geometric relationship to other points around the Earth. And that is, to my mind, part of what creates the vortex effect. It also has to do with, and I know we've come a long way from limestone, but bear with me for a second.
Oh, please. No,
We're
no.
talking
Go
about
ahead.
my favorite subject here. So
No, you go ahead.
so there's a number of other things, vortex markers in and around the Bermuda Triangle, which tend to support this idea of how the electromagnetism contributes. Not least of which is that the seafloor there it's a single plate that seems to be bulging in a way that, last I checked, there's no scientific consensus on why the seafloor plate there is bulging in quite the way it does.
Mm.
But earlier I mentioned oceanic tides, and one should remember also the continental tides, the pressure, this daily pressure and release on the continents themselves, and the
Right.
effect that would have on all these electric quartz crystals in the United States and elsewhere in the soil.
Mm.
Now, the limestone, I tend to think of it as not very energetic material, but it was, of course, that was the material of which Coral Castle was built, legendary tourist attraction built by Ed Leedskalnin in some inexplicable ways, how he managed all those materials and all that.
Levitation.
And and transporting the entire site from one location to another. All those, was he channeling? What kind of information did he have?
Right.
What did vortexes have to do with it? And it's just, yes, absolutely right. That whole area there of Florida is under the influence of these lines that radiate out from the Bermuda Triangle.
Right.
And so apologize if that was the long way around
No,
there
no.
to bring Coral Castle into the mix.
No, that is more than okay. I'm the stage is yours. So quick break. So for those of you tuning in, you are listening to The Outer Realm with myself, Michelle Desrochers, and a special guest, Dan Shaw, the Vortex detective. And is he ever? We are broadcasting live on the United Public Radio Network, UFO Paranormal Radio Network, 105.3 on the Gulf Coast and 107.7 FM, New Orleans, and Roku TV. So we are live on Roku TV. You can find the archive on Roku TV after the show. Well, maybe not right after the show. See how fast our producer can get it up, but will get there. So you guys in chat room are awesome. I love all the comments and questions. So thank you very much. So back to it then. So I don't even know where to start because there's so much. You sent me this interesting picture.
Let me just catch you up. You have listeners in New Orleans.
Yes.
So I would love to mention the fact that we do have some vortex maps or some geometric maps in and around New Orleans.
Yes, I couldn't get it open. I tried.
Well, we'll solve that.
Okay.
But meanwhile, there's one of my compatriots, one of my colleagues, Peter Champeau. He is one of the most prolific visionary mappers I know of, if not the most prolific. And he did a study of the geometry in and around New Orleans. And again, when people email me, that's something I can share is some of those New Orleans Vortex maps. And yeah, let me know if have any trouble opening anything.
Oh yeah, that one would
We'll
not
sort it
open.
out.
I could not get that one to
Okay.
open up, unfortunately. I just
It's often my fault.
right
So
now. Well, it's okay. We just have to bring you on again, and then we'll give it a whirl. By then, maybe we'll get
you might have needed a password on that one.
it. Yeah, possible. We were able to get the other one open, Nova Scotia Ley Lines. So what I thought I would do is show that one if you wanted to.
Great. Anything you care to show, because it's a highly visual medium for
Yeah,
sure.
there we go.
Okay,
There it
different
is.
researcher again, not my map, but one I published at vortexmaps.com. That's
Right.
John Coleman, and what you're seeing there is it's a composite map of several different geometries. Really, you're seeing some 5-pointed stars and some 6-pointed stars.
Right.
This one's kind of interest in particular because the way John Coleman backed into the subject strictly from the math, because he is and was a surveyor. And so these points were absolutely generated mathematically as opposed to somebody walking the landscape. And the 5 and 6-pointed stars, those are symbolically important. The 5 being considered the feminine, Venus, and the 6 being the masculine,
Right.
balancing force to the 5-pointed star. And you see there in the landscape, there's some natural features and also built monuments, such as the Mount Uniacke estate, that fall on these highly precise geometric patterns.
Right.
And as you talked about a year ago, again, in that Hamilton White
Yes.
interview, I'll refer you back to, you did raise the question about, the still seemingly not well addressed, the question about what is the meaning or purpose of the ancients building the monuments in these precise patterns.
Yes.
I may have alluded to it, though, if you think about it in terms of we're wanting to enhance these energies by building monuments essentially at the nodes where these lines of energy cross. We'd like to put our loving song into the earth lines here. So we'll build these monuments, such as these cathedrals, that are actually built in acoustic and harmonic proportions. And then once a week or more, we'll come and we'll walk the labyrinth and we'll sing and we'll put our energy into the earth grid at these points.
Right. Right. I think when you get places like Sedona, like we were talking about, for example, how the type of vortex and energy at Hoia-Baciu in Romania was. Then we get to the flip side, Sedona, which seems to have a whole blend of everything there as well, with vortex energy. In fact, more than one vortex, from what I understand, substantial in size. But people have really loving, energetic reactions there and experiences there. It's like night and day, between the two spots. So why would that be? Do you think it's because people go there with these incredible intentions and wanting to experience it and just this whole enlightenment about it? Like, what's the difference between there and a place with all these, for example, haunted forests, like the forest in Japan, the suicide forest, like these deep, dark energies?
Well, two parts or more to that question. So let's just start at Sedona.
Okay.
Sedona is part of this larger pattern of points around the Grand Tetons on the Restored North America map that I published.
Right.
So it's part of a larger pattern. It is an exquisite pattern within itself of these red rock monuments, the natural monuments, the Bell Rock and such. And the earth there is very red. It's high in iron, which is a magnetic mineral. And we too, our blood is high in iron, which is also a magnetic mineral.
Yes.
And And also, we have magnetite in every cell of our brain. We have a minute amount of magnetite, and more in this area of our sinuses, the third eye area, we have more magnetite. So
Mm.
we have that possible mechanism ourselves to have a magnetic sense, like the birds and the bees and the fish. But Sedona, in my opinion, has a tremendous amount of heart energy. It's
Mm.
that red heart energy
Right.
in that sense.
Right.
And so there's a great variety in the landscape. So each of the different monuments has a subtly different effect. But I would
Mm.
expect and I would look for different places in your landscape that resonate with different chakras. You can actually go on a chakra activation pilgrimage to different places to activate different chakras.
Right.
So
Right.
the Sedona landscape, Nicholas Mann, Mann, wrote a book about the Sedona landscape temple, and he shows a very exquisite set of chakras in the landscape, as
Mm.
well as the 5 and 6 pointed star that share a point, and also the iconic eagle and or bird and snake in the
Yes.
landscape.
Yes.
So Sedona, I would recommend it to anybody, of course. And some people feel that it is, the energy's not what it once was, that it's kind of getting overrun. It's harder and harder to
Ah,
find more places where, um, that seem pristine. And, you have to, I guess, go and experience it for yourself.
so the people, basically, with all that love and wonderful intention, it's like anything, beautiful monuments that get overrun. I think it does mess with the energy sometimes. And only because of the fact that we as people, we don't realize, but we have baggage. That's what life does. We're busy, we have a lot of things to do. People have families, people have to work a job, 2 jobs, come home, get the kids fed, homework, soccer. I mean, we're just really busy. And I think sometimes we just get so weighed down, and that energy is what we project out. And sometimes that you know, it does cause harm as well.
Well, that was the second part of your question, really. It's about what part does our intention play
Right.
if we set up an altar and we're doing a certain ceremony on a certain cycle or time cycle.
Mhm.
That's going to open up a certain kind of opening between the dimensions.
Mhm. Yes. 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 I think that happens quite easily, transference of energy. The example I like to use is, let's say you're getting into an argument with someone, you're out in the family room and and then you walk away and you come back a couple of hours later, you walk right back into that energy. It just stays. For every action, there's a reaction. We just sit there. And unless you somehow clear this or cleanse it or do something, um, that vibration is what remains in that time and space. It's why you have places, for example, where you have war. Those places I mean, can you imagine when you die, the transference of energy, just from the separation of essence from the physical, leaves such an impact in that time and space. Imagine that on a mass level.
Mm-hmm.
That's got to create something,
Very well said. Very well said.
right? Um, Question, while we're on the topic, do you know if atomic or nuclear bombs create vortexes or portals? Any sort of human technology of any kind? Well, I know it sure leaves a ripple effect, dimensionally speaking, that's for sure.
Right. There's that. Author and pilot Bruce Cathie, Cathie, of New Zealand, mapped UFO sightings
Hmm.
and found that they fell on a grid. It's a square grid. And he wrote a number of books in which he claimed that nuclear detonations could only occur at a very specific time and place, and that we were at no risk of some kind of all-out nuclear war for that reason.
Wow.
So there, some researchers propose that connection. It is evident that at many of these grid point locations, there is government involvement. There are military bases. There are nuclear mining going on, nuclear storage, nuclear processing, nuclear weapons,
Mhm.
atomic accelerators, particle accelerators, and such on grid points. So we do see many of those kinds of correlations, and it's, to my mind, entirely possible that some of the work with the particle acceleration is about this vortex research or may result in some kind of vortex effect. After all, they are sending particles around at an incredible rate in these massive circles. And these circles actually have an incredible resemblance to Stonehenge. They've got the ring and ditch appearance of the henges,
Mhm.
similarly. And there's evidence that the stones of Stonehenge, before they were disturbed and re-erected and such, that
Mm.
they had an actual directionality to them, right? These stones were set in a circle, and that they may actually have functioned as particle accelerators. If you were to dig deep enough, you would find that mentioned somewhere
Mm.
in the Stonehenge research. I forget where at the moment.
Do you think that's why a lot of different henges were built? Because, I mean, people know about Stonehenge, but there are so many others. In fact, pre-Ice Age, there's one in Lake Michigan.
Yes, the henges are distributed very much more widely than people realize. Stonehenge,
Yes.
again, the poster child, but not the largest.
Yes.
There are many smaller ones all over Europe
Right.
in many different configurations. Stonehenge is a little unusual in that it
Mm.
has the ditch on the outside of the ring that's
Mhm.
mounted up. The
Right.
ring is usually interrupted by one or more openings. And in
Right.
Stonehenge Gardening Tips, I explain how this functions, this earth mound and ditch functions as a kind of a harbor
Right.
to help normalize or filter out the chaotic earth energies
Right.
within the ring. So the henges can be built at any scale. You could build one in your own garden according to similar or same principles, and they are distributed, super widely. The henge refers to this ring and ditch. The stones, of course, refers to the stone, that part of Stonehenge.
Mhm.
And I think that talks all around your question. Did it answer your question?
Absolutely, you answered most of my questions.
Okay. I
I
sometimes
just
go off.
following the approach, So, I find it's phenomenal. Like I say, it always astounds me how, the technology of today. I mean, our ancestors. Well, we believe our ancestors didn't have technologies. I believe the technology goes back a lot further than we think, but they still were able to know where all of these incredible places were. You look at Göbekli Tepe, you know, that is an incredible location, henge type, right? But the fact that they buried it when they left and that there's probably another 11 or 12 of them in the vicinity and they all did the same thing is fascinating to me. Is it because was there, these doorways, these stargates? Is that what they were trying to hide? I mean, I don't know. It's incredible. Planetary energy is fascinating to me for sure. But then you have these otherworldly portals. I truly believe that there are other, interdimensional or dimensional beings that come in here from different multiverses or universes and they can create these things to come in and out of sometimes with a mere thought.
Yeah, I think I'm tipping the scale or the teeter totter on the other side, actually, because in the last 6 months or so, I've had some paranormal experiences which have even for me, caused some ontological shock.
Oh.
And to the point where, I'm not exaggerating, I was opening doors really carefully because I wasn't really sure what was going to be on the other side. Just
Ooh.
straight up, I had a couple glitches in the matrix. I don't really think I can go into them at length right now, but suffice it to say, I mean, things were disappearing and reappearing, and other things disappearing in just profoundly symbolic and inexplicable ways.
Right.
And so I'm actually, I'm trying to come to terms with living in a shamanic reality, which is far less stable than we give it credit for. I mean,
Oh, absolutely.
I think the fact that when we open a door and the thing on the other side of the door is what we expect, I think that's amazing. How
Right.
stable our reality is, because there's definitely some glitches.
Right.
Um, you know,
That's a
let
whole other show, and I'm happy to do it because it's true. You see things like this, people are capturing, like images of things just sitting there in midair. There's a video floating around there with a police officer, state trooper, and he comes in off this side road off near the woods and sees something just sitting there, and he looks, and it's a coffee cup in midair just sitting there by itself, just sitting there, and he's like going like this, like he's all over this thing and it's not doing anything, and then he touches it and it drops. So I don't know, call me crazy, there's just, but again, it's always in the woods because it's not creepy enough, but let's just do it in the woods. But I think the energy there, when you're looking at, like, talking shamanic energy, you're looking at elementals and earth spirits. And, there are so many magical beings within the forest. And along with that comes doorways. It's going to happen. So, you know, I'm a true believer in that. I really am. Because there are things out there that you can tap into and you can see them.
Amen.
Right? It's there. And now I'm going to be looking for darn vortexes and portals and stuff everywhere. Normally, I was just kind of going about my life thinking, okay, you'd see the occasional one, like it's this distortion in time, or this in time or space rather. And you walk and you can just see it. It's crazy. Or you just see things coming out of nowhere, coming this like, we saw that like this lantern thing coming right out of nowhere one time, just went right over the car, out of nowhere.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, of course.
Do vortexes have a smell?
I will say yes. And sometimes it's almost like sulfur, or just in some cases. Like it just feels like it comes from the earth, like a mildewy type.
Okay.
Yeah, and my experience.
All right. I've had and I do break this down somewhere in one of the books I've written about sensing vortexes, that really we do bring all our senses to bear. Sometimes people will taste like a metallic taste in their mouth.
See, yes, I've had that.
Yeah. And sometimes a pleasant smell, like perfume, something like that. Or
Yeah.
or I've heard people describe cigars where there's clearly
See, people will
done.
tell you they're associating that with maybe spirit activity, but
That's what I'm
maybe
talking
it's
about. Or maybe the smell of the seashore when you're hundreds of miles away. It just
right.
could be anything for anybody depending on the circumstances.
Why do you think that is? Well, because that to me is very interesting. If you're smelling, let's say, seashore. See, when I'm picking up mildew or like kind of sulfury, I'm picking up from deep down below the planet. You're going to get, you
Hmm.
know, something like that, dirt, right? But if you're smelling the seashore, which is like hundreds of miles away, why would it do that? Is it because it's connected, or is it because something's come through from that spot?
Well, I would raise you one there, because it's there is no separation. There just is no separation
Okay.
whatsoever of any kind between you and me, between you and your place, between you and past, present, and future. There's just no separation at all. It's part of our illusion, our limited perception that we're living under.
Right. See? So you think we're living in a matrix for real? We
I'm
have
not
the grid
saying
system. We
I'm
have the
not
grid
saying that we
system.
live in a simulation, but that does. I think if we were living in a simulation, it might kind of it would definitely explain the glitch in the matrix problem that
Right.
we have,
Right.
and it might explain the flat Earth hypothesis
Maybe.
too, which I'm having a lot of trouble coming to terms with. You can
Right.
imagine in my position, trying to come to terms with the flat Earth hypothesis, but the having these shamanic experiences
Right.
having these shamanic experiences just leads one to the position that we're not seeing all there is to be seen.
Yeah.
So we're living in a kind of self-imposed hypnosis for fear for me, because I mean the fear of like never knowing, every time you open a door, not being sure if you're going to be in a shamanic reality or in a mundane reality. I mean, that's tiring. That's
It,
hard to we like to
it
have some
is.
illusion of stability, don't we?
Right, right. It makes you wonder if we've shifted. Have we all shifted at some point into a different reality? So I love quantum reality talk. It just opens doors that you're like, we live on a planet. Okay. Let's break this down quickly. We live on a planet on this orb, apparently, loaded with a grid system of ley lines, vortices, vortexes. The energy is constantly flowing. It's constantly moving. Things are coming in and out.
Energy.
It's readjusting its frequency, its
Yeah.
vibration. How do we know? We haven't shifted someplace else. What's more powerful, our consciousness or the energy of this orb that we float around on? It's all
Well, like,
magical.
okay, I was going to take issue with the way you asked the question,
Okay.
because I think it's a false dichotomy there, because there's no
Okay.
separation. So how can one
I
be
do
more
that.
powerful?
So
It's all one. But then you saved it. You saved it beautifully there, which is, it's all magical. For
right.
sure. For sure.
Right. Right. So I don't know. I think you have to hold on to the whole magic experience of the entire
Yeah.
thing. We are
Yeah.
beings of energy. We are beings of light, having a human experience, and this planet is its energy. I believe we belong to it. We belong to something greater. I think you have to see the magic in it. I don't think everything can be explained away.
Good, because I certainly, I'm excited about a lot of information, but I don't pretend to understand it, or I don't want to be reductionist about it. It's not all about electromagnetism. It's a
Right.
lot about the mystery and about, how much remains to be known.
Right. I agree. Experience last week, I saw my living room wall disappear. The air was vibrating, and I saw the adjacent room as it was before this house burned down. Couch, bookshelf, everything. Just
Uh-huh.
see these little time slips I find are just so fascinating because they happen more than people think.
Well, for sure, and it's pretty revealing, your show comments there. It's my first couple of psychic experiences it was very hard for me to tell exactly what was happening and
Mm.
what part was I influencing events, or was I seeing
Oh, good.
something that was just about to happen in the future. And here again, in that, is that somebody seeing a different time somehow, like a perceptual thing, or
Mhm.
is there something happening on some other level where it's, because there's the internal experience, but then there's the external thing happening as well. So, it's hard to sort out what kind of psychic paranormal thing is happening there. Maybe two kinds.
Oh, maybe I'm slipping myself. Well, stranger things have happened to me, believe me. So, but I am really thrilled that you came on, and I know we jumped around a lot. It's just trying to cram as much information into 2 hours as possible. Um, but I would love to do it again, and maybe we can start streamlining now that we've lumped in all these different topics. We can streamline some things because I would love to delve more into how these energies affect us and our perception of things that we're experiencing and
Mhm.
such.
Mhm.
There's,
Well, I
there's some-
100% agree that it's challenging to draw a common thread from vortexes all the way through all paranormal, different kinds of paranormal phenomenon. But if you'll allow me,
yes,
I'll
of
just
course.
I will just kind of take a peek in the rear view mirror and kind of give the view from the distance, the perspective, kind of looking back in the distance. What I hope I've presented is um, a two-part equation, so to speak. The illusion that there's two parts anyway. There's ourselves and our energetic body, our electromagnetic cells and such. And that other part, which is also us, that not separate, but part of the unity of us, which
Right.
is which is the planet and all the churning ocean of electromagnetism that is the planet. And so, in this essential unity that we're striving to experience between ourselves and the planet,
Mm,
as we venture out of our home and back into our home, we just hope to be more and more conscious and sensitive to these thresholds, the
mm,
doorways. Our actual door is the threshold, and these, as we move from one energy or place or bioregion into the next,
mm.
to become aware of the possibility that we can actually sense in some way how the energies of the place are affecting us. And if we're looking for healing, or if we're looking to enhance our psychic abilities, then we can seek out these places where the places themselves, and perhaps the time, actually the day and the season and then time, will support us in developing our psychic abilities. We can go there for restoration, we can go there to meditate or to practice our teleportation or manifestation, or whatever it is we're seeking to develop in terms of our
Yes.
psychic abilities.
There certainly are many places that you can go to do this. I've been fortunate to be a world traveler, and I've always gone, obviously, to places that called me. And I'm one for the mountains, which is why, again, on another show, I would love to just really delve into these incredible mountainous vortexes, and because I've
Hmm.
always been drawn to the mountains for various reasons, and I try to spend time in them wherever I go. And, you know, there are just certain places that call you. I mean, we have people, from New York here. Lilydale is one of those places where they have this incredible energy within the forest of their community, and they call it Inspiration Stump. And you go through this forest and you want to feel magical. And they put fairy doors and fairy houses, and they'll tell you they come out, they're everywhere. There's these magical beings that come forward. People leave there feeling rejuvenated. I used to go just because with mediumship, you just over time, especially if you're overtired and not grounding properly. In early days for me, it was just like, oh, who has time for grounding? Go hug a I'll go hug a tree, it'll be the same thing, right?
I
Yeah.
was going to say, I mean, are you going to take issue with, now you're going to disagree with that statement?
Yeah,
Because
no. I was
the
hugging trees.
every tree is a vortex, and every grove of trees of
Yes.
different species of trees has a different kind of vortex energy to it, in my opinion. And I write vortex very, very large. It's very encompassing for me.
Right. Right. I
And
believe
and
that.
you're describing that there makes my nose tingle in a good way.
Well,
So
see, you could
that's
go.
now that's on my bucket list.
I know you should go. It's great. It's open year round, but in the summer it's a whole other feel because
Okay.
people come from all over the world to
Yeah. Well,
experience this
right.
place.
Meet me at the stump.
Yeah, at the stump. There we go. I have friends who live there. We could, yeah, let's
Yeah.
get the carte blanche tour. So, well, thank you for coming on the show. Thank you. It was informative, enlightening, a lot of fun, and it was nice to share a couple of hours with you.
Likewise. Likewise. It's an honor. Keep up the great work.
Thank you, and you as well. This just seems much more like, like you really have to be on it. It just seems to be changing all the time, you know. But I would love to do this again, and
Great.
I will message you with some dates, and let's play around and see what we can do for a part two because I know it'll be incredible.
Great. Well, thanks for everybody for listening and participating, and thank you for hosting.
Oh, pleasure, pleasure. I will be in touch.
All right. So long from Southern Oregon.
Good night, Dan.
Good night.
Well, we have come to the end of another fantastic segment, really a fantastic segment. It's so hard to put all of this information into 2 hours. It's really hard because it's just amazing. But I've always wondered about the differences with vortexes and portals and power spots and the connections. And I love how he can do that geologically speaking. It's just excellent. And you guys in chat room, always interesting. See, look at this. Look, you needed to tune in earlier. Banff, of course, unexplainable. I love the mountains. I am telling you, there's just something about the mountains. Spent time in the Highlands, the Carpathians, anywhere I can get my hands on a mountain, I want to be there. When I was in the south of France, I just couldn't get close enough to the Pyrenees, and it was very disappointing because I could see them off in the distance. There's just something about, about mountains that draw you in, and it could be because of all the energy. Stone does resonate and it holds on to sound and memory. It's just phenomenal. But anyhow, guys, thank you guys all for tuning in, and a big thank you to the Vortex detective Dan Shaw. We are most certainly going to bring him back on. Just so informative, and I hope it answered a lot of questions for you guys as well. So we'll let you guys know when he comes back and get those questions going because he's just a wealth of information. So tomorrow night, we welcome our dear friend, colleague, producer, and network owner Joe Montaldo, and it's going to be kind of an open mic night. Again, we're going to talk about a lot of different things, and he specializes a lot in extraterrestrials and UFO sightings, and has dealt with literally tens of thousands of contactees and experiencers. So get your questions ready because it will be a lot of fun. It'll be a really laid back show, which will be fantastic. Remember to go to Roku, watch the archives out there. We have a lot of fantastic shows here on the network. We're probably, between 26, 27, 28 shows here now. We've just made it so big and fantastic and all this information just flowing about. It's great. So anyway, check them out. What else was I going to say? I'm going to harp again a little bit about the Folgers commercial. It's been a really long time. So let's get those Folgers commercials, guys, especially if you want to advertise yourself. All you've got to do is keep it under a minute. It's got to be MP4, even with your camera phone. Do the whole Folgers song, show a Folgers cup. You can advertise yourself, what you do, drinking a Folgers. Folgers has to somehow be in there. We will show it on the show. I'm going to start bringing back some of our Folgers commercials. We will show it on the show because you know what? Folgers watches. They really do. They watch the show. They love this sort of stuff. And it sits in the archives. So essentially, it never goes away. So if you're looking to promote yourself or business, maybe you're, ghost research team, maybe you're, work in Reiki, maybe you're writing a book, whatever the case may be, just bear it in mind and throw us a little commercial. Just send it to, here, let me just get this off for a second. Hold on. Send it right here to the outer realm contact at gmail.com. Nice, easy. You can go to the Facebook page and you can also just click on the email button there and it will take you right to us. You can also find us on the network website, which is uprntalkradio.com. So that's another place to find us. And if you guys, no matter which platform you're on, please show us some love and support and just like, subscribe, share, comment. I love it when you comment. And if you're commenting on YouTube, you will hear from me. I don't always see it on social media because I'm just not on social media a whole lot, unfortunately. So, guys, thank you all. We'll see you here tomorrow night. We're going to have a lot of fun. It's going to be really laid back, and we'll be able to bounce around a little bit more. So, good night. Thanks.